Jess Rayner and I, Tom Rayner, have been talking about how different pastors are wired differently and why that's important. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. We looked at 4 types of pastors and we made the comment that, hey, nobody is usually all one or all of the other. You're parts of some, you lean towards some, and you just need to know so you could compensate for those areas where you may need to do more or less depending upon which area you're talking about. But we'll get to that as we thank Cheney and Associates, our sponsor, the church accounting firm. And I mean it. They are the church accounting firm. They're accounting firm for the church. Always have been churches, always will be. So look them up, Cheney and Associates. You can go to cheneyassociates.com, or you can just simply look in the show notes. Hey, don't do all the bookkeeping yourself. Don't do all the finances yourself. Turn to our friends, Cheney and Associates. Just had a conversation with Steve Cheney just a couple of days ago. Love what they're doing in California, but they can serve you anywhere. All right, Jess, we're talking about the different types of pastors. Different pastors are wired differently. And I kind of started the conversation, but you began it in the last episode where you're talking about, hey, you need to know these for self-awareness. Without repeating everything you said, give us the highlights of what you said.
Yeah, I think effective leaders understand their wiring because you understand your weaknesses, you understand your strengths, and you can lead in your strengths, and you can help others lead in your weaknesses. And so I know for me, I don't know, I probably should go back and revisit this for myself as well. But going through church planning, I got exposed to a lot of different types of personality assessments. And so it brought to light of like how I'm wired and what that means and what that looks like, what that means, how I communicate with my staff and how I interact with other people. And so I think because of that, it's made me a better leader. And that's my encouragement is take some time, just even going through these 8 and do some self-analysis. Be honest with yourself. What parts do you enjoy? What parts do you not enjoy? What parts do you find yourself maybe even taking an inventory of like out of your work week? How much time do you spend in each? Kind of giving an indicator of how you're wired. And don't look at it as a positive or negative. Just look at it as a reality and go, okay, if I'm not doing this, how do I begin to do this? Because all of these aspects, except one we're getting ready to talk about, are really needed in a church.
So we started off in the first part of the previous podcast. We talked about the pastoral care pastor. We talked about the preaching preferred pastor. We talked about the doctrinally driven pastor and then the activity driven pastor. You need to be all of those at different times. You need to emphasize all of those. You may lean one more to other, but none of them need to be number 5. It's rare that I discover this pastor, but it doesn't take me long to discover this pastor. It's the mostly lazy pastor. The role of pastor can be conducive to the extremes, workaholism or laziness, because accountability is not present moment by moment like working in an office, for example.
Right.
And so you're an example of someone who probably should pare back a little bit on the hours because you work. So you would be not the extreme, but you'd be way away from the lazy pastor. But there are a few lazy pastors out there, Jess, and it doesn't take long to discover them. I see them in coaching, and you know what they want in coaching and consultation?
Affirmation?
Silver bullets.
Okay.
They want a quick fix so they don't have to do much.
Gotcha. Yeah, and this again, we talk about how do you. Nobody wants to admit that they're lazy, mostly lazy, and so it's like my challenge. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, how do I do this one? Have you ask yourself and answer it honestly? Have you become complacent? Like, are you okay with everything just staying the way as it is? Are you okay with status quo? And that may not mean that you're lazy, but at least that might give you a little bit of insight of like, well, maybe I'm not working or doing the things I should be doing, because if you've gotten to this pattern of I'm just going to keep it as it is and I'm okay with that. I think health in a church is indicated by growth. It doesn't have to be huge growth, but there has to be some growth, spiritual growth. There's got to be reaching. There's got to be these elements that it can be tough. So I will say, if I can, you didn't really mention this, but I feel like in your 8, but this is where it might fit. Just because, if you're hearing this like, oh, I'm not going to be a lazy pastor, I think it's important for pastors to find those moments of rest.
Good.
There has to be the Sabbath element. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to be the mostly lazy pastor, and so you work, so you don't actually ever rest, that's not good either. There has to be those moments of Sabbath. So don't hear this and feel like you can't rest.
Right.
Biblically, you're supposed to rest.
Good word. Good word. This next one sounds negative, but it's really not. I call it the template behavior pastor. This pastor likes routine. They like to find things that they can fit into their church that they don't have to create themselves. They like patterns. There's a time for those things, and there's a time to be creative beyond the template, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a great, your assimilation process, your follow-up process, this is great for that. To think about, what are some things we can do on an ongoing basis that are going to be impactful. But every so often, you need to go back and reevaluate. You need to, throw some new ideas in there. The danger, I think, of a template behavior is stifling ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of good, because template behavior, especially for a church, allows church members to know which lanes they can run in and how they can, very organized, very structured. So template, I think, has a really good place within churches, especially smaller churches where the pastor is limited. If you can create these templates for people to use, that's great, but just don't let it stifle.
Good word. Good word. Organizationally focused pastors, they love structure. They want precise organizational charts. They look at their bylaws. They actually read their bylaws on occasion. They love systems. They love behind the scenes systems. They love upfront systems. I see a little bit of you in this.
Oh, for sure. I mentioned in our last episode that I find myself leaning towards the activity driven pastor. This would be the other one I would say of the 7 that I would find, where I most identified is this organizationally focused pastor. I do. You would see my project management software that I just have for myself. It's all in there. And so, yeah, I do. I see myself in this one, that I do want an organization that has clarity, and it's helpful, and it's really good, because that's what you get from this. It's clarity of an organization and what it means and the expectations. But this can be a bit of the tail wagging the dog if you're not careful. Much like the other one with the template behavior, you can lose ideas. This one, you can lose your direction pretty quickly if you're not careful.
That's a good word. That is a good word. And by the way, I guess we're talking about family just because we're talking about me and you. You are not like your brother Sam, but you are in this way.
Yeah.
He loves systems. He loves organization. And he spends a lot of time with Church Answer. So I see a lot of that. And, don't we have enough systems right now? Can't we just go do something creative? Let's stop all the systems.
Yep.
But y'all are very different in your leadership styles, but that's one of the similarities you have. And in the meantime, your brother in the middle is nothing like either one of y'all.
That's true. That's true.
He's
God bless him.
God bless him. The last one sounds like, this is the great one. It's the Great Commission pastor. It is great. I mean, it is that, but there's the possibility of being so outward focused you don't take care of your flock. So there's a negative to that. And that's how I was as a pastor. I know that may surprise you, that I was that way, but I was evangelistically and growth oriented, often to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think anybody does evangelism enough, but I did it to the neglect of some things that I should have been doing.
Right.
So I wanted to bring that out right away, because that sounds like that's the good guy, number 8. It's not always the good guy. It is a strength of mine. It's a weakness of mine.
Yeah. And you didn't ask me when you came up with these, but I would almost have rephrased that one. It's the growth pastor, mm-hmm. rather than the Great Commission pastor. Every pastor has to be a Great Commission, Great Command pastor. So this to me is more, it's a pastor that's solely focused on growth, mm-hmm. and add to the point that it like you said, you can neglect other pieces. So that would be a slight change. Instead of calling it the Great Commission pastor,
I actually like your change, to be honest.
Well, there you go.
I'll take it. So this particular information is in an article called "The 8 Types of Pastors." Is that what it's called? It's called I'm looking at the title here. 8 types.
8 typologies.
8 typologies of pastors. We have the links in there. I don't see the actual title, but we'll have the link in there. It is behind a paywall, which means if you're a member of Church Answers, you can see it. If you're not, you can become a member. But we've given them all to you. If you say, "Oh, I don't want to pay for anything," that's okay. We've given you 2 episodes where you can go back and listen to those, and you don't have to read the article. We just want to let you know it's in one of our paywall articles. Thank you, as always, for being a part of Church Answers and Church Answers podcast. I appreciate that. We've got some good things coming up in 2025, but we're not done with 2024 yet. So we're going to be sharing those in the near future. As always, thank you who are listening on the podcast. Thank you for watching on YouTube, and keep coming back to the Church Answers podcast. See you later.